Hey, everybody. I want to talk today about something that is really crucial to freeing up energy in your life and giving you the best chances of actually just doing what you want to do and living the life that you want to do. And that is learning to prioritize yourself. Now, that can sound like such a sort of a stock self-help phrase, but in this little episode, I want to just explore the roots of it and then some of the difficulties of it because so many of us are all conditioned. So we have an automatic response inside us where we just prioritize all those around us first. And it's a little bit like we are programmed to serve. And what happens in a scenario like that is the one person who doesn't get served is ourself. And quite often, the reason that we stuck in life, the reason that we end up slightly unsatisfied, the reason we often have a deep, lingering feeling of unfairness is because when you don't know how to prioritize yourself, you're always missing out. So I'm going to look about at that today in this episode. So to create a kind of a background or a blueprint for understanding of this, I want to talk a little bit about the gene keys because it's not simply about prioritizing yourself. It's really about aligning with the changing tides of our present reality. Okay, because um, we are moving from a time of survival, right? We're moving from what you would have called like survival consciousness towards individual awakening. Gene Keys is a book I sometimes reference. It's from Richard Rudd, and it just talks about the evolution of our genes and what is coming next for us as a species. And you can take it with a pinch of salt if you want, or you can just sort of feel it through your own body. You can kind of begin to sort of look for moments when your body is maybe just say intuitively going, this makes sense to me, or is rejecting it, and let that be your filter, right? So what is happening according to Gene Keys and just according to our own kind of sensitivity to change is that we're becoming more mature individuals. If you can imagine before that the old pattern for many of us was I have to belong at any cost. And the emerging pattern now is much more I will become fully myself. And then I will offer my gifts to the community. To make it personal, I often think this, I kind of part of my upbringing in Ireland was like, God, how can I just belong here? How can I belong? And then reaching a point where I felt there's something emerging in me that won't be safe in this country. And so I left. And now, having kind of explored my gifts and having kind of brought my gifts to the surface, I feel I can return and yeah, and offer these gifts to the community. I think we all have that similar arc where there is an initiation of feeling like, oh, this isn't really safe for me to be me here. And so we must go away. And that going away doesn't always have to be geographical. It can just be we diminish ourselves, right? So this kind of the new story that's coming through to replace the old story and the old story of fitting in, of pleasing, of duty. The new story is really no, my duty is to become fully alive, right? So you notice that in so much of the work that I do, uh, the the kind of proof of concept is always, does this make me feel alive? Does this make me feel excited? So that can be something like, God, I set a boundary. Whoa, I feel so alive, terrified, on edge. These things, or oh, I just went and I handed in my notice. I feel so alive. The alive thing can also be, um, unfortunately, it can often be like a feeling of like terror in many ways. Like I've just gone and done something completely out of character. Um, but this is what makes us healthy, mature individuals. We're going for what we want. We're prioritizing what we want. So, and a lovely way to approach this idea of how to prioritize yourself is to hold this one question: what is life trying to express through me? And there's a lovely sort of, this is where Buddhism can also help. And I hope I'm not trying to synthesize too many elements here, but if you can imagine with Buddhism, um, what we're asked to explore with Buddhism is this sense of not really being a self. If you can imagine, Buddhism looks on the individual as a little bit like a television, just a an object through which electricity flows. So you and me, our human body, it's just a body, but something flows through us. This life flows through us. And this became so clear to me. I remember when my dad died and I was with him at the last moment. And the minute he died, it just wasn't him anymore. It was just so clear that that body was just did not contain him anymore. It almost felt like, we didn't need to mourn over the body at all. It was just like, "What? That's not him. That's something very impersonal." But the him, the life that had been there, was suddenly all around us in the room. It was quite phenomenal. And so this is sort of, I think having this in the back of your mind is beautiful. This sense of like, hey, this body, this container is less important than my relationship with the life that is trying to flow through the container. So that question, what is life trying to express through me? So let's begin. And I've made a little list here. So the first thing, prior to prioritizing yourself, it's not selfish. It's your responsibility. Um, we again in this period of survival consciousness where you had to belong, the most important thing was to be perceived as good. As little children, we grew up and the highest compliment was you're good, right? So you learn this as a strategy from very, very young that ah, I will belong in my family, I will belong in school, I will belong in community if I am good. Um, Quite often, though, that goodness, in order to be perceived as being good by everybody, you have to self sacrifice. This is why we're often exhausted, right? Um, because we're constantly abandoning ourselves just to get this, just to maintain the reputation of being good. So, prioritizing yourself ends all of this. It stops this kind of leak of energy because your energy is leaking in maintaining this facade that you are good. You're not supposed to be good to everyone, right? That's not how we work in this world. You're supposed to be authentic. And then people can either project admiration or judgment onto that, and that's fine. Number two, and this is so interesting. This is something that I notice so much in my life, that most of the obligations that I encounter aren't real. So it's a situation where a friend is in a panic and I feel, oh, I must rescue them. And that doesn't happen. And then I realize that they had lots of other people who could have rescued them too. You know what I mean? So most of the obligations aren't always real. Most of the obligations are just because we have an identity, a psychological identity that I'm nice, I'm reliable, I'm indispensable. I know for me, for so much of my life, well, I'm a Taurus, and Tauruses kind of have a reputation of being like grounded. You can go to them, they help out. And I think this was very much sort of an identity that made me feel It helped to eliminate feelings of shame inside of me by feeling like, oh, I'm reliable. Connor can help out. But what this meant is that I had a lot of friendships that felt a little parasitic in their nature, you know? And my relationship with my family was completely out of balance. My relationship with partners was terrible because I was always the giver and eventually ended up becoming exhausted. So I think like this idea of like owning where your sense of obligation is coming from and looking at it and going like, ah, are these emergencies just actually excuses for me to show that I am indispensable? Because many of us want to feel that we're indispensable. Number three, um, enthusiasm is information. Right? Now this may be a little bit of an obscure thing here, but what I'm trying to talk about is that when we are constantly in this mode of I'm indispensable, I'm kind, I'm reliable, I'm nice, we often just don't know what we want. We don't know what excites us. I'm gonna use my poor mother as an example here that whenever she isn't fixing emergencies, she's quite often lost because there's a part of her personality that she hasn't explored. She hasn't always looked into her enthusiasm. Do you know what I mean? So it's really important that we become people who are enthusiastic. This is like our life force. Your enthusiasm is saying to you, hey, if you do this, it will open doors, it will create joy, things will advance from here. But if you are constantly deprioritizing yourself, there won't be a lot of enthusiasm. A sign of a healthy person is one who has a lot of enthusiasm for life. Enthusiasm grows where obligation diminishes. So I think that's really useful. Um, Number four, and this is more kind of a warning, if you're not prioritizing yourself, someone else will come along and prioritize you for themselves. Look at this. This is really interesting. Life finds ways of filling up your space. You know, life finds ways of making demands upon you. Be it, it could be work, it could be family, it could be the fucking algorithms. You know what I mean? Are you there, like scrolling away? Like, are you then suddenly getting excited with, I use this word pendulums. Pendulums are just these moments of like group energy that just take on a life of their own. They're often political. When everyone is suddenly, you could see it with the World Cup there. There was a pendulum against Argentina. It was almost pantomime where Argentina was suddenly, oh, they're the worst people in the world. They're all villains. And there was an element of that, but it wasn't that bad. But a pendulum gathered to suddenly like the whole world was against Argentina. Argentina were bad. And then the whole world was, oh, and Spain are so good. Spain are so good. And maybe Spain are good, but maybe there's also a couple of like bad characters in there too, right? These are pendulums when everything becomes polarized. So if you're not prioritizing yourself, someone else will prioritize you for their needs. I was at a friend's house who's a wonderful artist. He lives in the countryside in Mallorca. And I was so impressed by how protected he is. He, you cannot reach him in WhatsApp. He has a phone that has WhatsApp on it, but he only checks it once a day. His other phone, like his landline, is how you reach him. Um, he doesn't have internet in his home. He's just not involved in things um, without voluntarily getting himself involved in things. He's hard to reach. And I was just so impressed by how he was able to prioritize himself. And I really took a leaf out of his book. I thought, wow, this is something interesting for me. And perhaps he's even the inspiration for me creating this podcast. So this idea of becoming someone who cannot be easily interrupted, I think is deeply empowering because you are prioritizing yourself and you are not allowing little cracks where people can get in. Um, Number five, and this is the hurdle. This is often why we don't become ourselves, is because to become yourself, to prioritize yourself, involves feeling guilt. Many of us, when we feel guilt, it's like we are being burnt alive. The feeling inside your body is, oh no, I will be rejected. I will be completely abandoned. I would really encourage you to play with guilt. I would really, really encourage you to just run some risks with guilt. As someone who kind of set quite strong boundaries with my family, yet still go see them every summer, still talk to them on my phone, the phone, still has a relationship with them. I haven't been, you know, cut out of inheritance or anything like that. There's no communication barriers. Um, there is light on the other side of guilt. As someone who has also like sets quite strong boundaries with my partner sometimes, and she's upset by this, and I feel guilt. But then on the other side of the guilt, I have what I need, and the relationship bounces back to a more secure place. So there's something about, I think, for you, for all of us, in becoming more comfortable with inviting guilt in. Allow it to come in, allow it to kind of shake your very foundations and soothe yourself. The reality is you're just choosing yourself. This guilt is an old mechanism to keep you in service. And then the last point that I want to make, um, and hopefully this is a nice point, but it's just this idea that, you know, once you start to give yourself permission, and once you stop asking for permission, your life completely changes. So this is just permission to travel, permission to create art, permission to rest, permission to disappoint people, permission to change your mind, permission to say no, right? Once you start to give yourself these permissions, not ask for them, just give them to yourself, then your life really, really begins. And and that's the very essence of prioritizing yourself is just stop asking for permission. We need to stop treating the world as this spiteful, angry authority figure, almost like God of the Bible who was always testing his faithful, oh, will they still love me? This sort of stuff, like the manipulative shit that went on there. My God, go kill your child to show me that you love me. This sort of stuff. And that we still carry some of that, the after effect of that messaging, that we need to ask for permission. The way that we begin to prioritize our lives is just to stop asking and start doing, and just begin your life. Um, so I hope this is useful. I hope this is interesting. I think this might be like a big theme of our autumn work, is this idea of just how to prioritize yourself and what that means. So thank you for listening. Send you loads of love and chat to you soon. Bye bye.